It happens sometimes in bookshops or in libraries that you get this connection, a bond, if you will, with a book. And it could be because of something really superficial, like, the color of the cover or the first line of the book. Well, first line isn't that superficial, I guess, but you know what I mean? Like the title, something like that, which really connects you to that book. Or perhaps it's, a writer that you really love and you didn't know that they had a new book out, or one that you'd never heard of, and there it is right in front of you. Or else maybe for you it's the El Dorado of books that you've been searching for all your life, and there it is on the shelf. But for whatever reason you get this moment of, like, I don't know, this overwhelming feeling that you have experienced a miracle in discovering this book. I've been experiencing this a few times lately, quite recently, so I thought I would make a list of how many is it? 5 books, I think. Yeah, 5 books that I found, and I would rank them in order of miraculousness, so that at the beginning it's kind of prosaic and it's just like a cool book it looks kind of interesting, but by the end it's something really impressive for me. And so hopefully, gradually the intensity will increase as the video goes on, and by the end of it I'll be like shouting and hitting the camera with the book. So to begin with, we have Evil Roots, Killer Tales of the Botanical Gothic. This is one that I picked up in Surrey Library, which is my local library. And I don't know, I've always liked the idea of plant horror, and I didn't even think of it as a subgenre, I suppose, just that there are books which go into this. They are the Triffids being one, or one of the ones that I've read in here, what was it called? Rappaccini's Daughter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. So I think that's the only one, the only one I've read here. So I'm really excited to read all these other authors. And oh look, it's got pictures as well, I didn't realize that. That's nice. Oh, and I've lost it already. They're like pictures of plants while reading about plants in a horror context. Maybe cannibal plants, maybe poisonous plants, maybe just eerie plants, I don't know. But I really liked this idea, and I liked the cover, and it just, it was on the shelf. So I thought, why not just put that on my shelf instead, and maybe it'll be something that I dip into now and again. So that's the first one. The second one, still in Surrey Library, is Don't Look Now by Daphne du Maurier. Du Maurier is one of these writers that I have always wanted to read for years and years. I love the Hitchcock film Rebecca. I love The Birds. Is The Birds by her? I think it is, right? And I quite like Don't Look Now, the 1970s film. But the thing about Daphne du Maurier is one of those writers who I always feel is just always there. Like especially these days, I feel like her books are always in a bookshop, always on shelves, always being recommended on BookTube. So there's something about the kind of reliability that, I'm definitely going to get to this writer at one point, but it doesn't have to be today, right? And so I've never actually gotten to any of her books. But this one, I guess I did I know that Don't Look Now was by her? I'm not sure. But I at least had forgotten about it, and I'm pretty sure I'd never seen it, at least as the title of a book with such a gorgeous cover. This publishing imprint or brand or whatever it's called is called Penguin Decades, and this book is supposed to represent the 1970s, and the cover was designed by somebody who did like fashion in the 70s. I would wear this book if I could. It just looks so good. I just love the cover and the feel and the colors, and everything about this looks really exciting. And of course, Don't Look Now is this really eerie horror. A couple who lose their daughter, and then they go to Venice, and then it's kind of creepy in Venice, and there's canals and like a killer, and it's good. But this includes that story and also other short stories. I think that's like a novella, or a very long short story anyways. I think it takes up like a lot of this book. I haven't really looked into it. But now that I've got Daphne du Maurier for the first time like in my house, I do feel like I'm going to be reading this. At least Don't Look Now. I don't know if I'll read everything in this, but at least Don't Look Now is going to happen. Now we're moving on to a different library, because while Surrey Central Library, which is my local, is really good, and I love it as a library, gorgeous space, loads of light, loads of books, and it's just a bit noisy sometimes, but apart from that, really great place. But the next library I want to talk about, which is Vancouver City Central Library, is the place where dreams come true. This is like easily one of my favorites, if not my favorite library. And they've got so many books, which is obviously the main thing you want from a library. I was looking for a book of poetry called The Shield of Achilles by W.H. Auden. And I found it. Of course they had it. And I read it, and it was kind of great. But also lots of stuff that I didn't quite understand. But while I was looking for it, there was another book, like in the Auden section, which this, The Age of Anxiety, which has a terrible cover, like just to contrast it with the last one. Whoever thinks that it's a good idea to take a photo of the author and make that the cover of the book is, I don't know, that person shouldn't be employed in the publishing industry, because if I was a writer as well, I wouldn't want my face or my my full body profile at the beach as the cover of my book, right? But anyway, this is it's a poem, but it's like a kind of weird play-like poem. It's kind of like this. It's like a dialogue between four people in a bar. But I think I've been reading it, and it gets kind of like phantasmagorical. But when I picked it up, I just picked it up because of the title, The Age of Anxiety. It feels like, oh, this sounds like very modern. It sounds very, now, very 21st century. Although it was written 1947 or first published 1947. So that's kind of interesting if it's like, oh, Age of Anxiety, but not our Age of Anxiety. So I wonder what kind of anxiety they're going through and what does he talk about, right? But that wasn't the thing. The title kind of made me pick it up, but that wasn't the connection. That wasn't the spark. The spark was when I opened it to a random page just to see what it was like, and the first thing I see, like quite into the book, the first thing I see is this line: "I must go away with my terrors until I have taught them to sing." And that was it. That line, I was like, I'm getting this book, and I've been reading it. Yeah, this is of the books that I'm talking about today. This is the one that I've actually started reading, and I'm well into, and it's really good. Not every line is as good as that particular line, but that I must go away with my terrors until I've taught them to sing. It's just one of those lines that like pierces you, right? And like once you've been pierced by a line, you're like, okay, obviously I'm going to read the rest of that book now, and I am reading the rest of that book now, and I'm enjoying it immensely. And it's just like with the other Auden book, there's lots that I don't quite understand. I feel I'm not quite smart enough to get, but there's also, I don't know, a lot of sense of something that is impressive, even though I don't. I can't necessarily articulate what that is. Now, these last two books are also from Vancouver Library, and they're also both kind of Eldorados, like I mentioned in the introduction. So there's this writer, one of my favorite writers, and his name is Heinrich von Kleist, and I've read most of his short fiction, but I knew that he was also really famous for his plays, and his plays have not really been translated into English to my knowledge at the time that I read the short stories. And since then, I would sometimes search for the plays online, and I couldn't find them. I'd find them often in German, or I'd find like monographs, which are really academic, but only partially translated or whatever. But I couldn't find the actual plays, even though that's like kind of one of the things he's most famous for. So that was kind of a bummer, especially because two of his super famous plays are called Amphitryon and Penthesilea, and those are both Greek myths. So he's adapted Greek myths, and Greek myths are another thing I really love. So a worshipped author plus Greek myths retelling is what I really want to read, right? But I couldn't find them existing. And so I kind of thought, well, I guess they haven't been translated yet, right? That's a shame. Until I was strolling through Vancouver Library, and I was going around a section that I hadn't gone before, just because I thought, why not? Let's see what's in this corner. And when I was kind of done with it, I'd seen this is okay. It's kind of modern contemporary stuff that I could find in maybe any library. And then I decided to take a right at a particular aisle. Originally I was walking forward, but I thought, why not just take a right here? So I took the right, and because my body was turning right, my gaze also kind of moved to the right, and I saw the Kleist section, including Amphitryon. And I think this is just like a American publishing thing, because when I do internet searches before, they're usually with UK publishing and UK bookshops, and those they don't have Kleists, is what I can see, apart from the prose stuff. They didn't have any of the plays, but here we have them. They had all the plays that I know of that Kleist has written were there. in different editions and in different translations. They were all there on the shelf, so it was like an absolute goldmine. Part of me wanted to just take everything, but I decided I'll just go for one volume. I'll just grab one of the Greek plays that I really wanted to read, and it's this one. It's something really nice about this book. It's super light. It's about a general who has a betrothed, and she doesn't want to marry him until he avenges her brothers. So by killing some pirates. So he raises an army in a different city, he goes kills the pirates, but before he can get back, Zeus, the king of the gods, disguises himself as Amphitryon and then comes home and says, hey, I beat the pirates, and has sex with the wife. Then Amphitryon gets home and he says to his wife, hey, I beat the pirates, and they have sex, and she's like, this is a little weird, you're acting weird, we already did this. And he's like, what are you talking about? And I think it's a comedy, but because it's Kleist, I imagine there's an element of paranoia and kind of identity crisis, which is gonna be really meaty and exciting to get into. So I am just so thrilled to be able to have this. I don't want to read it yet because it's so kind of precious, but it's also so slim that I could read it at any time I want. So that is wonderful. And now the last one. This last one is similar to Kleist in that it's a book that I had been searching for and thought didn't exist, and have periodically searched for it in my life and not been able to come up with anything. But this needs some backstory. So we're going to go back. Cast your mind all the way back to the first years of the 1st century, when the Roman poet Ovid, one of my favorite poets, probably my favorite poet, let's just say it, my favorite poet at this point. He gets exiled from the Roman Empire. He goes to the Black Sea, where he writes lots of very whingy poetry about how difficult life is. And one of those poems is called Ibis. Ibis is what's known as, I didn't know this existed, but it's what's known as a curse poem. So he wrote a poem which is also a curse, which it's just so hardcore already, right? He uses his vast compendium of Greek mythology, which he just carries around in his head like an encyclopedia, to, curse somebody back in Rome who he doesn't like. And if I know Ovid, then this poem must be the wittiest, cattiest, most Greek mythology infused takedown rant of anybody in existence. So obviously I want to read it, right? So now fast forward to the 21st century, and here is Seb really wanting to read this poem and not being able to find it anywhere. Although that's not technically true. Actually, I could find it straight away when I looked online, but the translations were really sus because, I don't know, you don't trust it if it's free, right? If you find something free, it's always a bit, even though there's loads of great free stuff out there. I find, especially when it comes to translations of people that you care about and, especially poetry, right? The translation is so important. And I have read translations of Ovid I don't like. And so I didn't want to just read something that sounded so amazing and read a substandard version of it. But unfortunately, I couldn't seem to find anything modern. The book that I had of the poems he wrote in exile was missing the Ibis. Although in the introduction, the writer said, I plan to write, translate the Ibis in a few years. And then I looked and nothing. He just didn't do that. I don't know what happened. I think he's still alive. I even thought about emailing the translator to say, why didn't you do this? Because I love your translation work, and this poem needs to have a modern translation, and it doesn't seem to exist. What I did do though is there's a book called one of the books I have is the Heroides, and those translations are great, and the translators have a handy list of other translators of Ovid that they recommend for all of his major works, including the Ibis. So some guy called Mosley was the one they recommended for Ibis. But when I searched for that as well, I couldn't find it. And now I know why I couldn't find it. Basically, the first thing that happened was when I searched Vancouver City Library, one of the first things I searched for, so this was a long time ago actually, this was like when I came to Canada actually, I searched for Ibis, Mosley, Ovid, and it came up. So I knew that it was in the library, and I was overjoyed. I couldn't believe they had it, and I was so excited, and I decided I wouldn't order it, I would just wait. And one day I would go searching in the library and try and find it on a shelf somewhere. And it was something amazing to look forward, like buried treasure, right? And that just has been just a positive thing in the back of my mind for months and months and months. But I wanted to read a different work by Ovid. I wanted to read The Art of Love. And I took that out instead. And here it is. it's the Loeb classic, The Art of Love and Other Poems, and it's by J.H. Mosley. So when I got it, I kind of realized, wait a minute, I've heard that name before. And lo and behold, one of the other poems is the Ibis. Here, I don't know if you can see it in there, but there's the table of contents and there is Ibis. So it is ensconced within this. And that was one of the reasons, probably when I was searching before, like if you search for Ovid and Ibis, you get loads of Ovid stuff in your search results, and this probably came up. And I could clearly see it wasn't Ibis from the cover, and I foolishly didn't look any further than that. Anyway, here it is the point. And this is super old, by the way. This was originally published in 1929. This edition is 1979. But yeah, that kind of says something, that the modern recommended translator for this poem by professional translators of Ovid is something that was published in 1929. In their opinion, there hasn't been a better translation of the Ibis since 1929. So that is obviously a gap that somebody could be filling, but I don't want to turn, my tone is making this sound like a rant. It shouldn't be a rant, it should be positive. I promise positivity and miraculousness in this video. But yeah, I have the Ibis in my hand and I'm going to read it. I'm going to read both The Art of Love and the Ibis. I'm going to read this whole book, both the love poems and the curse poem, and that sounds like a nice balance, doesn't it? Like kind of the dark and the light. So there you have it. Those are the books. I'll pick them up and show you them. My recent miraculous finds. As you could tell, the first ones aren't so miraculous. They're just like really awesome. It's more like these last three, which feel like miracles to me. But anyway, especially the last two. Let me know, have you had any experiences like this recently, or that you can remember of just finding a book and connecting with it and like kind of having, whether it's something you were searching for ages and couldn't find, or were just like attracted by one of the lines like I felt for The Age of Anxiety, or even just an amazing cover where you just felt that is phenomenal and I want to read that book. Oh, and by the way, for people who are curious, I decided to name this rabbit Marcel. It was something I mentioned I would do in one of the previous videos, and there you have it, Marcel the rabbit. If you've enjoyed watching this video, please leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.